We're talking about the hollow earth. The hollow earth theory has such a special place in my heart for some reason. I don't know why, but like the idea of a world within a world where there's like giants or there's these other beings or aliens or like government conspiracy theories and all that is so sick to me. So that's what we're diving into. Almost every major civilization or religion, culture has some kind of lore or theory or story about the hollow earth or something that relates to it that connects to some kind of underworld. And a lot of the time, these ideas are connected to places of origins of where their specific culture came from, or where the origins of man had started, or it's some kind of like spiritual afterlife, whether that's good or bad. And we're kind of gonna get into both those. Like some cultures have it like that's like a heavenly area, and some places believe that it's like a hellish plane. So we're gonna go through a few of those. So in Greek culture, obviously everyone's heard of Hades. They believe that there are at least 5 caves in Greece alone that leads to this underworld, Hades per se, and they're like of mythical or mysterious nature, and I think if there is some kind of hollow earth system that can be physically, like materially got to it, let's say for example if that's correct, then I wonder how many different cave systems you could find that would lead to the hollow earth, if at all possible. Then there's the Christian beliefs of, hell, brimstone, fire, German sex dungeon, all that kind of stuff. In Jewish culture, it's called Sheol. I don't know. It's an underworld of darkness and stillness, and it's referenced in the Old Testament, I believe, and this could be totally wrong, so don't get mad at me. I want to say it has to do with some kind of witch story of someone asking someone to raise somebody from the dead. So it kind of implies that it is some kind of afterlife, and with the whole darkness and stillness thing doesn't seem like a vibe. In Nordic culture, I'm not even going to try to pronounce this. Whatever I put up on screen, that's how you say it. It's considered to be the realm of dark elves, and that can also be referenced to dwarves, or better known as dwarves. And I think that's such an interesting perspective, because if I believe that every kind of like myth and legend obviously has some kind of truth to it, and fantasy is riddled with that, and I don't know, dwarves had to come from somewhere, and there are a lot of stories throughout the entire world of like dwarven people living in caves and living in the deep within the earth, and who's to say they're not coming from within the earth itself. So in Tibetan Buddhism, there is Shambhala, which is an ancient city, and this will I'm going to get more into that specifically when I talk about Hinduism, because Hinduism and Buddhism kind of share a lot of the same beliefs when it comes to Shambhala from what I was researching. So hold on. In Mesopotamia, there's stories of a subterranean garden through a tunnel in the mountains named Mashu, and this ties into some people believe that the Garden of Eden itself is the hollow earth, and that there is some kind of divine entity, God, or whatever you want to call it, that kind of rules within that realm, and that is where Adam and Eve were, or whatever, that's where that story kind of originates from, and that this God or whatever casts humanity out into the surface world, away from this ancient peaceful garden and whatnot. In Celtic and Irish mythology and lore, there's a lot of stories of caves that lead to hell or to purgatory, like these sub-earth, subterranean mystical planes of existence that you can get to physically. And I've came across another interesting story that I kind of wanted to kind of touch on, of a mystical place known as the quote-unquote other world, or land of, this is going to be very hard for me to pronounce, Tautha de Danann, and is a place inhabited by supernatural beings responsible for introducing Druidism to the Irish before disappearing underground. And this is a common story as well, is seen through a lot of different cultures as well, and a lot of it has to do with these beings that come out of the ground, and again, whether it's the origins of man or they kind of have blessed humanity with these forgotten knowledges and forgotten practices. And this idea of Druidism kind of, in my mind, could be a metaphor. Like, I'm not saying that like magic couldn't have been real at some point, and I want to do a whole episode on magic at some point, but let's say, for example, there's these ancient people who were just like like huts and farms, or even hunter-gatherers and stuff like that, and these people come out of wherever and they're like, yeah, we're from within the earth, we're from these caves. Here are some of our practices, our beliefs. Here's some of our technology. Like, if you were to go to a uncontacted tribe, or like one of the tribes in Africa, or like the Amazon, that have never, have no contact with the outside world, and you show them your phone, or you show them AI or these supercomputers, and you try to describe it to them, it's going to sound otherworldly. I would argue that these more ancient people, and like these stories, are from people who could only describe these spiritual practices or these technologies that were given to them by potentially older civilizations as magical, or of godly power or divinity, or whatever you have it. And I think this kind of ties into the Graham Hancock's like Younger Dryas theory of like the ancient civilizations and stuff, and like that's like a whole rabbit hole in and of itself. But anyway, I think that's such a cool concept. Because it makes sense. In my mind, it makes more sense than these wizards lived in a cave and then blessed these people with arcane knowledge. But I guess that'd be kind of sick. Let's talk about Hinduism for a second. So they have what is Patala, I believe is how it's pronounced, and it's considered to be super beautiful with gems, smells, groves, and music. And there's no old age, no sweat, and no disease. So it is just kind of like a paradise, like a no ailments, like almost like a heaven. And then there's also Shambhala, as we talked about earlier with Buddhism. And this is a quote from somewhere on the internet. The Puranas tell us that at the end of Kali Yuga, the Kalki avatar will be born in the best of Brahmin families of Shambhala, and that he will annihilate the miscreants on the entire surface of the globe. Then, men will come to the surface from below torn colonies and restart Vedic culture. So, a little backstory is there is this cycle of the universe that plays over and over, and there are different ages, and Kali Yuga is the last one, and then the avatar, as it said, Kalki, is supposed to come back and is born onto Earth, and then is going to kind of purify the planet and restart the next one, the next cycle, pretty much. And so this also kind of sounds reminiscent of what is found in Christian mythology, when God is supposed to come back and save all the God-fearing people and kill all the sinners. Those, that story. It also ties into the ideas and the stories of the Garden of Eden being in the, or at least heaven being in the center of the earth, and that these godlike beings or God is supposed to emerge from it and then, fuck shit up. The Agnami Naga tribes, I can't read, so, claims that their ancestors emerged in ancient times from subterranean lands within the earth. And so this kind of goes on another rabbit hole as well, that the Naga in Hinduism, I believe, or in Indian mythology, are these like snake people who live within the earth, and they're just like another almost humanoid, half human, half snake species of being, basically, and that these people believe that they are the descendants of these people. There's like a bunch of stories with different tribes on different islands, like in the Caribbean or over in New Guinea, that kind of believe that their ancestors are from within the earth and their ancestors came out of caves. And in Native American cultures, there's stories of these tunnels and these passageways all over the United States, but mostly in the southwestern region, that there are these passages that lead to more of a spiritual underworld or some kind of subterranean realm that their ancestors emerged from. And it is said that in the Grand Canyon, Arizona, Mississippi area, you can find these caves and actually travel to them, and that'd be pretty sick if you ask me. I even found stories of Russian mythology talking about it, and then even in Germany, there are myths of a portal in Germany that you can take to the inner earth. And you can't talk about the hollow earth without talking about Germany, if you know what I mean. But we're gonna get to that in a second, because I want to talk about kind of the original ideas of the hollow earth before we kind of get into the more conspiratorial side of things. Edmund Halley, who is, yes, the Halley's Comet dude, is considered to be the guy, the dude who kind of made the idea of the hollow earth popular. And he theorized that the earth is considered of two outer crusts and one inner crust. So there are 3 layers of the earth, and each crust has its own atmosphere and can be inhabited. And this is just him speculating, in that each crust has its own poles, and this could explain anonymous compass readings. So back in the day, there are these specific stories of the fact that sometimes your compass, when you're out on the ocean or when you're trying to use it in certain areas, would freak out. It's because there are multiple sets of the north and south poles of the earth within the earth itself. And that he also theorized that the aurora borealis, or the northern lights, are gases leaking from the other crusts into the outer shell's atmosphere, and that is what we are seeing. And this connects, now that I'm thinking about it, to the later theories that there are holes at the poles, and that rhymes, of the earth. And it would make sense, because if these are gases leaking out of the holes, you mostly see the northern lights in colder areas, like more north or more south. Anyway, so then after he dies, about 40 some years later, John Cleves, I think, Simons Jr., suggests that the earth had consisted of a hollow shell, and the openings were about 1,400 miles across, or 2,300 kilometers across at both poles, and with with this theory, he said that there are 4 inner shells and each open at the pole. So kind of think of Halley's story or theory, but more. Just more layers and more holes. He proposed that the curvature of the rim of the polar openings would be gradual enough that it would be possible to actually enter the inner Earth without being aware of the transition from one layer to another. And he argued that due to the centrifugal force of the Earth's rotation, the Earth would be flattened at the poles, leading to vast passageways to the center of the Earth. So basically, if you were to take a snowball and put your fingers on it at both ends and spin it, your fingers would drill a hole through where you put, where they're sit. So his idea is that the Earth has these multiple layers, and because of the spinning and the gravity, the Earth is almost doing that same thing and folding in on itself at the poles. And this idea ties into some later stories of Admiral Byrd and things of that nature. So then, now I kind of want to talk about this book titled Smoky God by William Emerson. It came out in 1908. It describes the account of Olaf Jansen, fucking can't read for shit, who sailed into the center of the Earth with his son. In my notes I wrote day because I have a disability. But he traveled to the center of the Earth with his son and spent 2 years living amongst these entities, or these people that live in the Earth. And apparently this book is based on real life events. Believe what you want. And that the inner Earth is claimed in this book that it's lit by a dimmer sun, and that the inhabitants are a race of advanced giants who have electricity and extremely long lifespans. And I would argue that I don't think I really need to make the connections here, but I feel like this all kind of like goes in tandem with each other, with like these beings that can live longer and they have these technologies and these powers and all this kind of stuff from within the Earth. And whether or not this William Emerson guy had a really good imagination, or he, actually talked to these dudes, because the idea is that he wrote this account after being told this story. So it's a possibility, I guess. You can go down this rabbit hole forever, and there's so many different stories, going from the giants to gods to Atlantis and aliens. It seems kind of like a theory that encompasses all other theories, and I don't know if that leads to its credibility or not, but it's fun to talk about. There are a lot of stories of people claiming that there's like megafauna there as well, like the King Kong movies or the Ice Age movie, where they go to the center of the Earth and or the Journey to the Center of Earth, there's like dinosaurs or these mega beings there. And I don't know anything about fucking shit, to be totally honest. So we have stories of giants and we have stories of dwarves, and I would like to know the science of if there was, like, if you get closer to the center of Earth, would it make you smaller? I would think it would make you smaller if you're living in caves and shit. But would the gravity kind of like pull you in a way? Because there'd have to be some kind of anti-gravity effect of the outer crust being pulled off the inner crust, so it even creates the hole in which people could call the hollow Earth, right? because then if there wasn't, it would just because you would need to have like the multiple layers, and then have one force of like either anti-gravity or gravity pulling the top layer and pushing the bottom layer away, but also retaining enough gravity to hold it all together. So would that cause giants or dwarves? I don't know. If you're watching and you wonder why I keep looking down, it's because I have my notes on my phone, so that I'm not remembering all of this. I'm just gonna be honest. But you can't talk about the Hollow Earth without talking about Hitler. On a side story that is kind of related, Hitler was really invested in this idea of the concave Hollow Earth, and tried to spy on the British by pointing infrared cameras up at the sky, and with the idea that the frequency or the wave would bounce off the rim of the Earth and be able to like see the British, I guess. I don't really know. There's like this idea of like the hollow Earth, but then there's also the idea that the Earth is within itself and we are on the inner Earth, and then there's an outer Earth that we are not privy to, and that we're actually in the inner Earth. And like, sure, but like space, dog. Anyway, so the basic theory is that the Nazi Party had come across some kind of alien technology or some occult tech or science that pushed them to try to find this Agartha, which if you play Black Ops 2, we can be friends. And that they had found this like arcane knowledge that would lead them to this realm of godlike beings, and their whole pursuit was trying to get there, I guess. And there are stories of Hitler being very involved and interested with the occult. And one specific occultist group known as the Thule Society was very, very interested in Agartha, and it was kind of their whole thing. And Hitler, being how he was very interested in this society given their occult knowledge of Agartha. So he was very interested in their practices and what they believed, because he believed that if he could learn these things, it would aid them in Germany being like a superpower or whatever. There are connections to be made between Hitler's idea of the Aryan race and the Hollow Earth theory, because some people think that this is potentially where he got that idea from, of like this race above all others, that of like mythical proportions. And this kind of ties into what is known as the Nordic aliens. And for those who don't know, I'll see if I can find a photo that I can put up. But basically, it's this idea that within the Earth, or depending on what you believe, there are these beings that are really tall, super pale skin, blonde hair, and blue eyes. And there are rumors, or I can't tell I don't know if they're rumors or a fact, that Hitler was very obsessed with this specific, almost like kind of person. And he believed that it was like the purest version of a person. And so there's the idea that he was inspired by this, super race that lived within the Earth. A little history on like the Nordic aliens in relation to like the Hollow Earth is, in the mid 1950s, George Adamski, I think, is claimed to be of one of the few first people to have come in contact with these Nordic aliens. And it is noted that they have these telepathic powers, and they're very benevolent, and they're very physically beautiful, and they can almost like seduce people with their almost mystical beauty. And then this is often attributed to this idea of an Aryan race. Now, there are tons of different interpretations of that, but in this context with Hitler and the Hollow Earth and these aliens, this is kind of the triangulation of these concepts that leads some people to believe that Hitler was very invested, or why he was so invested in the occult things that he was, if that makes sense. I'm not trying to say anything. I'm just telling you what other people believe. If you think it's bad, then don't watch this video. As we all know at this point, the Nazi Party was very interested in Antarctica and had actually sent a, what some people call a secret mission to Antarctica in what time? Between 1938 and 1939. However, the official account is that they went there for whale blubber to make oil because Hitler wanted Germany to be as self-sufficient as possible without relying on other countries' imports. And one way to do that was to make their own oil using whale blubber. Now, that's the official story, and I don't believe it. The idea is that they had a secret military base during World War II in Antarctica that was being used to conduct certain experiments and tests and trying to find the Hollow Earth or this Agartha alien Aryan race. All of that. Let's talk about Admiral fucking Byrd, dude. Admiral motherfucking Byrd. So we've all heard of Admiral Byrd. If you haven't, he was a general during World War II. Really big deal. Look him up. He is claimed to be the first person to ever reach the North and the South Pole, both. And however, there is some controversy in whether or not he did this, but he's like the guy. And rumor says that he had saw, and that there are evidence of these mystical aliens or the Hollow Earth itself. There are rumors that he saw evidence of this alien race, and that he experienced what was talked about earlier with the gradual passageway from one crust to the other, and that he was flying his plane over the North or the South Pole and ended up in the Hollow Earth and didn't even realize it. And that kind of ties into like how the theory was that the holes would be so gradual that you could slip into the inner Earth without even knowing it. And if you read through some of his, I haven't looked into it too much because it seems kind of hard to find, but there are stories that his personal journals have these accounts written by him, and that is a huge contributing factor of why people believe that the governments of the world were very interested in the Hollow Earth and everything. And then you can also say that there is, that also ties into why a lot of countries don't want people to be there. So I'm going to talk about that. So Admiral Byrd is tied up with this government operation. It was Operation High Jump, and this is kind of a pillar in the Hollow Earth, something's going on with Antarctica theories. So officially it was titled the United States Navy Antarctic Development Programs, and it lasted from 1946 to 1947. And the operation was organized and led by Admiral Richard Byrd. The task force that was sent there was known as Task Force 68, and included, ready for this, 4,700 men, 70 ships, and 33 aircraft to, quote-unquote, test basic training and equipment, study the environment, and establish a base for the United States. And if it's basic training and stuff, I understand, like, that, I guess, but Antarctica, there's nothing happening in Antarctica. Like, you can't do anything. You can't build anything. You can't grow anything. So, like, my idea was, like, first of all, when are you ever going to fight anyone over there? And second, it seems kind of implausible that anybody would, like, fly over there to get to you, because the weather is so bad that flying is difficult, and is also, like, okay, let's take this for example. If they're worried about, like, the Japanese or the Germans flying to Antarctica and then to America, it would take so much more maintenance, money, time, fuel to fly to Antarctica and then why didn't just fly across the ocean? And it's like, I just don't buy that they needed to train in Antarctica because nobody's going to use Antarctica for anything. All you're going to do is study the ice. I don't know. So in 1947, Admiral Byrd did an interview with the International News Service. And then this was later transcribed and put in newspapers. And he discussed the lessons learned from Operation High Jump. And then this is an excerpt from that interview. Side note, this is a long quote, but it's necessary. So with that being said, I understand that during World War II, there was a lot of advancements made in the, realm of warfare. I mean, it's not that hard to fly over an ocean or ship troops across the ocean or fly them in the air or anything like that. So we can't rely on the distances to protect us from, warring parties, I guess you could say. However, like I was saying earlier, who the fuck is gonna fly over Antarctica before they fly to one of the superpowers they want to attack? I just don't why is that a concern? Because it's not like they can fly to Antarctica, fill up their planes, and then fly back. Why not just send it to the main area first, And so I would argue that a war in Antarctica would be implausible. It would be kind of a stupid play on everybody, both the attacker and the defender. I'm going to meet you in this icy dungeon of a continent, and we're going to fight it out. That's not going to happen. Just go to Siberia. And I can't help but think that maybe this is not real. This is all in Minecraft. They've got to be hiding something, because it's why would they? Why? Just why? That's all I got. Because it's there's no logical reason, in my opinion. Again, I don't know what the fuck I'm talking about, but in my opinion, it doesn't seem like anybody would need to have military experience fighting in Antarctica. So then let's talk about, for a brief moment, Operation Deep Freeze number 1. Now I think there are 3, but I just kind of wanted to draw attention to this first one briefly. Is basically, it was the last time Byrd went to Antarctica, and it was to study more stuff, and it was the beginning of a permanent U.S. military presence in Antarctica. And this took a collaborative effort of 40 nations. And I just, why? Like I just said, who's pulling up to Antarctica and I'm gonna duke it out, I want this. There's no resources there. And why would you need to establish a military base in Antarctica for any reason other than there's something specifically in Antarctica that you're trying to protect? So now we're gonna talk about the Antarctic Treaty. The treaty was signed by 54 countries, which included the United Kingdom, the United States, and the Soviet Union. And basically what it states is that nobody can go there, nobody can own it, and anything there has to be approved by the treaty signers. Fuck. So all of these countries come together and are like, you cannot go to this place without our approval to go there. And it's under the idea that, or it's under the umbrella that it's not safe and that it's hostile and you can't own it because of how bad it is there. And I would argue that that's bullshit, because yes, nobody, like I've been saying this whole time, nobody would want it, but it's almost like it's like a rule that was already implied, in my opinion. Like, of course, nobody's gonna want Antarctica. Like, yeah, there's people there now for like studying science or whatever, but you can't put anything there without all these countries knowing about it and all these countries approving of it. And it has to be through one of, if not all of these countries, to put whatever it is that you want to put there. And so it kind of harbors this idea that all of the governments of the world are hiding things from us, but they would never do that. And I can't help but think that I need to go to Antarctica and, take a little nosedive and see what happens. Another idea that I had was that there are all these theories that the aliens come from like within the earth, or like there's always like the stories of like the aliens that are coming out of the ocean. And my idea was that there are these tunnels within the oceans and within the earth or whatever that lead to the hollow earth, and that the aliens actually are coming from the hollow earth through these caves or doorways or these portals. I fucking love portals, dude. And that is how they've gotten this anti-gravity technology, is because what I was saying earlier is that there would have to be some kind of anti-gravity property that allows the crust and the inner earth to not collapse in on itself. So my idea was like, what if there is some kind of anti-gravity that they're predisposed to and can study, that's already within the earth, and that is what is being used to power their UFOs and all that good shit. And not to be that guy, but so there's a theory that the universe is made up of 70% dark energy, which is considered to be a hypothetical anti-gravity and has a repulsive effect instead of a pull effect like gravity does, hence the anti-gravity thing. So it is possible, theoretically, that there is some kind of force in the universe to have the opposite effect of gravity. So who's to say that this overly abundant dark matter that potentially has anti-gravity effects could be sustaining the separation between the different layers of the earth, and through that these aliens or these beings that live within the earth have been able to study and harness it because it's naturally there in their environment already, being used in that way. Who's to say they're not using that as part of their technology, and they come up here to study and see what's what, but then they're like, you can go on any tangent you want of why they don't interact with us more. Just an idea. But with that being said, that's all I got. There's definitely some giant dwarves and some aliens living in the earth. I read somewhere that Shambhala is guarded by like these guards, these like giant beings that you have to surpass based on like your karma or something. I don't know. I got tired. But with that being said, I hope you enjoyed. I hope that this was interesting. This is honestly just going to be a channel that gives me an excuse to talk about and research weird stuff. So if you like that kind of stuff, stick around. And I never know how to end the videos. I really don't. But thanks for watching, and I'll see you hopefully next week.